Premier Doug Ford's canceled winter vacation to Florida caught the attention of the Sunshine State's leader today. Governor Ron DeSantis responding to his boycott, saying visits are actually up in Florida.
Well, the province is launching a multi-billion-dollar strategy aimed at turning Niagara Falls and the wider region into a world-renowned tourism hotspot. The Destination Niagara initiative targets investments in developing new attractions, including a potential theme park and observation wheel, along with bringing in more casinos and gaming experiences.
I did, but it's not as easy as it sounds. We just can't sell it off, and I'm not going to do that during Christmas holidays when it will hurt our wineries, it will hurt our distilleries, and it's just not going to happen. Yeah, so let me tell you, it's going to be the first time I'm not going to Florida. But I talked to so many people. Don't let this guy Trump determine and ruin your life and everything. That's my personal choice. Maybe some families have gone to Florida their whole lives. Go to Florida.
For years, trade disputes between the United States and Canada followed a familiar script. Sharp words behind closed doors, careful language in public, quiet negotiations meant to cool tempers before real damage was done. That pattern broke the moment Doug Ford stopped pretending this was just another disagreement. When Ford spoke, he didn't hedge. He didn't soften his tone. He didn't leave room for interpretation. He drew a line that hadn't existed before and made it impossible to ignore. This wasn't a routine clash between allies anymore. This was confrontation out in the open, and it came with consequences far larger than a press conference, because what followed wasn't just a response. It was retaliation with structure, money, and long-term intent. The story didn't start with words. It started with pressure, months of it. Tariffs that hit Canadian steel with surgical precision. Auto supply chains squeezed until margins disappeared. Agricultural producers watching contracts evaporate while uncertainty spread across provinces that depend on cross-border trade to survive. The message from Washington was clear. Apply enough economic pain and Canada will bend. Hurt the workers, make the damage visible, force the leadership to come back to the table on weaker terms. That strategy had worked before. This time it didn't. Instead of quiet compliance, something else began to happen. Something no one in Washington had modeled. Canadians didn't wait for government instructions. They didn't need a mandate. They reacted instinctively. Travel patterns shifted. Spending habits changed. Decisions that had been automatic for decades suddenly stopped being automatic at all. Florida bookings collapsed. Cross-border shopping slowed to a crawl. Snowbirds who had spent every winter south of the border quietly changed plans, not out of anger, out of resolve. Money stopped flowing where it always had, and it happened without a single law being passed. That's the moment Doug Ford stepped forward and said what many Canadians had already concluded on their own. When he called Trump a tyrant, it wasn't a slip. It wasn't emotional overreach. It was the public articulation of a reality Canada had been living under for months. Economic coercion aimed at an ally. Pressure designed to extract submission, not compromise. And Ford made it clear he wasn't interested in playing along. But here's what made the moment different. Ford didn't just criticize, he moved. On the same day he delivered his sharpest words, he unveiled a response that went far beyond rhetoric. A counterstrike built on infrastructure, capital, and time. A plan that didn't rely on hurting the United States, but on replacing it. A multi-billion-dollar investment strategy designed to redirect Canadian spending back into Canada itself. Tourism was the first front. Niagara wasn't just being promoted, it was being rebuilt. Expanded airports capable of handling international traffic from anywhere in the world. New transportation corridors, entertainment districts designed to extend stays from hours into days. The goal wasn't symbolic, it was mathematical. Capture the dollars that once crossed the border and keep them home. This wasn't defensive economics, it was substitution at scale. While Washington leaned on tariffs, Ontario leaned on construction cranes. While American policy tightened screws, Canada laid foundations. And the timing couldn't have been more precise. Every dollar that didn't land in Florida hotels began landing in Canadian restaurants. Every canceled U.S. flight created capacity for inbound tourism from Europe and Asia. Every abandoned shopping trip strengthened domestic retailers. The shift didn't stop with tourism. It spread into consumption itself. Wine shelves changed. Beer sales changed. Spirits followed. Ontario wine sales surged by 67% in a matter of months. Not because imports were banned, not because prices were manipulated, because Canadians chose differently, quietly, consistently, at checkout counters, not rallies. That distinction matters. This wasn't nationalism driven by slogans. It was self-interest expressed through everyday decisions. When faced with uncertainty imposed from abroad, Canadians didn't escalate. They adapted. And adaptation, when multiplied across millions of people, becomes power. The mistake Washington made was assuming leverage only flows one way. Tariffs feel aggressive because they're visible. They make headlines. Consumer behavior doesn't. But when behavior shifts, it rewires economies. Border towns felt it first. American tourism hubs noticed occupancy slipping. Retailers along the northern states began reporting slower traffic. The loss wasn't dramatic enough to dominate headlines, but it was steady enough to worry analysts. And behind it all was a realization that unsettled policymakers. This wasn't reversible with a press release. What made Canada's response especially dangerous wasn't its volume. It was its permanence. Infrastructure investments don't unwind when tempers cool. New trade relationships don't disappear when rhetoric softens. Once supply chains reorient, they rarely snap back into old shapes. Doug Ford understood that. So did Mark Carney. Where Ford spoke plainly, Carney worked quietly. While Ontario focused on internal strength, Ottawa accelerated external diversification. Trade talks with Asia moved faster. Energy exports redirected toward Europe. Financial institutions signaled confidence in Canada's stability at a moment when volatility dominated U.S. policy. The two approaches weren't competing, they were synchronized. Ford gave the public permission to stand firm. Carney gave global partners confidence that Canada would remain predictable. One reinforced domestic unity, the other reinforced international credibility. Together, they shifted Canada from reactive posture to strategic positioning. That's why the countermove worked. Trump's strategy relied on isolation. Canada's relied on substitution. And substitution doesn't require confrontation. It just requires alternatives. Once those alternatives exist, leverage evaporates. American analysts began noticing the imbalance. Tariffs were creating friction at home while failing to break resistance abroad. U.S. manufacturers faced higher input costs. Border economies felt reduced traffic. Meanwhile, Canada's internal market grew stronger, not weaker. The irony was impossible to miss. Pressure meant to weaken Canada was accelerating its independence. That's the deeper story behind Ford's words. The explosion wasn't emotional, it was strategic signaling, a message to Washington that the old assumptions no longer applied. Canada wasn't waiting for relief, it was building around the problem. And that changes the math. When consumers shift, industries follow. When industries follow, investment moves. When investment moves, power moves with it. Slowly at first, then all at once. This wasn't about winning a trade dispute. It was about ending dependence, about proving that economic sovereignty doesn't require isolation, only options. And Canada, step by step, was creating those options faster than Washington expected. That's why the response felt so sudden. It wasn't improvised. It had been forming under the surface for months, waiting for the moment when restraint no longer served a purpose. Ford's words marked that moment, not because they were harsh, but because they were final. They signaled that Canada wasn't negotiating under pressure anymore. It was planning beyond it. And once a country stops negotiating from fear, the entire balance shifts. What we're watching now isn't a feud, it's a reordering, a neighbor deciding that resilience matters more than approval, a government choosing investment over indignation, A public expressing resolve not through protest, but through participation. The tariffs didn't break Canada, they revealed it. And the countermove didn't just answer Washington, it made Washington less relevant. That's what makes this moment different, and that's why it won't be easily undone.